Fantasy football players, we love rookie running backs. But how do the first round running backs do in their first year in the league? Let's talk to SI fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano. He did a lot of research when it comes to rookie performances and their correlation to going in the first round of the NFL draft with how they do in fantasy football. Fabs, we haven't had a lot of running backs go in the first round over the last few seasons. How many have there been, and how have they been doing?
So let's break it down, right? Since 2010, so we're looking at a decade, 17 running backs have come off the board in the first round of the NFL draft. And there was two drafts, 2013 and 2014, not one running back went in the first round, which is crazy, right? Because if you think back to like the late 70s and early 80s, there was a stretch of 5 years where four times in the NFL draft, a running back was the number one overall pick. So times have changed, of course, in the National Football League. So I want to go back and look at 2010 to 2015, first off. And that era, well, we had some studs, we had some duds. Remember CJ Spiller and Ryan Matthews, Javid Best, Trent Richardson, David Wilson? Those guys didn't have a lot of success, right? Richardson had a big rookie campaign. Matthews was pretty good as well. Spiller had one top 10 finish. But ultimately, those guys really didn't pan out. Now, when you look at Mark Ingram, for example, his career from a fantasy perspective started off kind of slowly. His first 3 years, he wasn't super valuable. And then he came on in his last few years at New Orleans, and his first year in Baltimore, he was also very good. 2015, Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, both first-round picks, right? Todd Gurley ended up having a top 10 finish. If you remember, Melvin Gordon didn't score a touchdown as a rookie, not one. So Gurley was great. Gordon wasn't very good. Ultimately, they both became elite fantasy running backs during their careers. Of course, Gurley a little bit more than Gordon. Right now, Gurley's value is in a state of flux. He's a free agent coming off of a down season in Atlanta, and Melvin Gordon is on the RB2 radar. So we've certainly seen some guys put up great numbers in that time frame, again, 2010 to 2015, but better things are yet to come, and we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, so it's interesting you brought up Gurley and Gordon. We were showing the pictures of the team that drafted Todd Gurley, the Los Angeles Rams, and then now you just mentioned he is a free agent after playing with Atlanta. Melvin Gordon, same thing, gets drafted by the Chargers, and now he's off to playing with his second team. Now, the next group of guys, they have all been drafted in the last 5 years, so they're still with their original teams. But how did they do as rookies, and should we expect big things from this year's rookie class?
The trend has been better. It's been much better. And again, not a lot of rookie running backs get picked in the first round. I mean, last year, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the only guy, and he was the last pick in the first round, and the results were somewhat uneven. But you looking back to 2016, the two biggest duds have been Rashad Penny and Sony Michel. Neither one of those guys has been a top 30 running back. But let's go back to, say, Ezekiel Elliott. Every single year he's been a star, okay? And last year he was the RB9, and that was a bad year, okay? Christian McCaffrey has become the consensus number one player in fantasy football. Saquon Barkley was the consensus number one player in fantasy football a couple of seasons ago. He's dealt with some injuries, but still he's a consensus top 5 pick, right? And Leonard Fournette, drafted in the same class as Christian McCaffrey. I get it. Last year wasn't great from a fantasy standpoint, but he's had 2 top 10 seasons with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Josh Jacobs, he had a rookie season where he finished 21st among running backs. Last year, he was the RB8. Unfortunately, he is going to get Kenyon Drake in Las Vegas this season, so that's not great. So overall, since 2010, 10 first-round running backs, or about 60%, have finished in the top 10 in fantasy points as rookies. The next best finishers were, again, Jacobs at RB21 and Edwards-Helaire at RB22. The remaining 5 didn't really put up great numbers. So 12 of 17 first rounders were at least low-end RB2s, and ultimately several of them were very good as rookies and became even better as their careers moved on. So this, to me, this trend is great news for the likes of Travis Etienne, Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, because I think those are the only 3 running backs who have a shot to be picked in the first round. And maybe none of them is picked in the first round. Maybe it's one. Time will tell, because the NFL and their teams devalue running backs so much. For me, I hate that because I'm a running backs truther. But if you get a first-round running back, the trend is telling us in the last 5 years that at least you're going to get yourself a pretty decent RB2 and maybe more.
So the NFL draft is coming up at the end of April. We'll have plenty of analysis around the NFL draft and how it's going to impact your fantasy football team for 2021. You can check out more of Michael Fabiano's excellent insight by going to si.com/fantasy.